What's up, guys? Welcome to the first ever episode of Tyler's Talking RC. Um, just coming live from the RCMadness studio. We're just going to be talking about everything RC. I'm Tyler C, and I'm sitting here with
Tyler P.
Tyler P. Today's episode, we're just going to do a little introduction about ourselves, and then we're just going to get into talking about getting into the RC hobby itself and the different types of RC cars and different ways they can be used, and maybe help you guide you in getting into the hobby a little bit, and just generally talking to each other and you about the hobby. So I'm going to open up. I'm Tyler C. If you guys don't know, I work here at RCMadness. I've been here about 10 years now. Doing repairs, running the store, the YouTube, podcasts now. Just a little bit of everything. If you're a local, you've definitely seen me around if you've ever been here, because I pretty much live here. And then I'll let my buddy Tyler P tell us what he's doing here.
All right, so unlike Tyler, I'm not lucky enough to work here. I have a regular job as an aerospace engineer. It's not as much fun as working on RC cars every day, but it pays for RC cars, so that works, I guess. I've been in the hobby since I was probably 10 years old or so. You can do the math and figure out how long that's been. I started with just bashing around in my backyard, and then in the late 90s ran Carpet Oval at KNRC in Stafford Springs. Kind of took a hiatus when I went off to school, and as soon as I got out of college, had a house, had a little bit of property, was like, oh, I'll get some dirt cars and bang around. And then I came here, and that was right at the beginning of the short course craze. So I started doing that, and just kind of went from there. In my free time, when I'm not here with the race cars, I do a lot of like vintage stuff, RC car restorations, old Kyosho, Tamiya, stuff like that. So pretty well rounded in the hobby.
It's funny you said you came in during the short course craze there. I think I came in just right about the same time. I think we kind of came in and you realized that.
Yeah.
That was early 2000s, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because I've been coming here, I think, 10 years. I used to bring a logbook with me.
We just learned something about each other.
Yeah. Anniversary.
No kidding. Wow, that's great. But yeah, I came in, I think, about the same time, about 10 years ago. Yeah. Short course craze. That faded right out, but that's for another show, I guess.
Yeah, that was good times.
Yeah.
Watching people get hit by a four-wheel drive short course truck at full wick.
Not good.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting into the show here a little bit, we wanted to just open up with people looking to get into the hobby, but being a little bit lost because it's turned into quite a hobby. There's a lot of different categories that you can get into. It's gotten pretty big in the last at least 10 years that I've been here even, and I think it started in the 80s, maybe even a little bit before that. But anyway, so just getting into it. When I have a customer come into me and ask me, I'm looking to get into RC. Well, in the first place, you've walked into a hobby shop, so you've already taken a good step in the right direction. So for those of you looking to get into it, try to find a local hobby shop. I know this may not be a possibility for some people out there, unfortunately. You're going to be stuck to just kind of online and researching yourself, which is why we're doing this podcast. But if you can find a local shop, definitely try to do that. Find somebody knowledgeable in the hobby that can guide you a bit. But coming back from that, so they've asked me, I want to get into hobby. Which car should I get? Yeah, that's a bit of a loaded question these days. There's so many cars. You really got to find out what you want to do with the car and where you're going to drive it.
Well, right. And two, I mean, if you compare it to, so being the historian here, if you compare it to where the hobby was 20, 30 years ago, you had, hardcore dedicated race cars associated in Low C, Schumacher, Kyosho, the old brands. But then you had, Tamiya and some of the other brands where you built a kit and it wasn't aimed at racing. So you had two very, very clear paths to take. And there were the number of manufacturers even was limited.
Right.
Bashing was not really a thing, and
well,
these high voltage cars that we have now.
Easy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's gotten way more complicated. Not just like the number of choices you have, but what you can do with them.
Right.
You know, we talked about rock crawling earlier. Like, that's another whole genre of off-road.
Right. So usually when somebody comes to me, I break it down into, for me, I have three categories. I have bashing, racing, and rock crawling. I throw in its own category because it's really become its own thing in the last 5 to 8 years, I'd say. So really, we're going to get into that. We'll start with bashing. If you're looking to get into bashing, what should you get? Well, inside that category, there's a whole bunch of other trucks.
Well, we should probably define for those that
okay.
don't know,
Okay.
what is bashing, because it has kind of a rough connotation or sound to it.
I guess that can mean a lot. Bashing can mean literally trying to break it every time you use it to just putting around your yard.
There are people that do that. There are people whose aim is to trash the car. I've seen so many taco chassis on the bench out here that Tyler's had to fix. But
I am the in-house mechanic at the moment, and I've seen just about every break, and I have done a lot myself, which is fine. It's all part of the hobby, I love it.
Total opposites. I go out of my way to not break stuff. If I break stuff, I'm devastated. My night is ruined. I'm going home. I mean, not literally, but I have too much empathy.
We should define it. Bashing, I consider basically anything not on a closed race course.
Yep.
More or less. You're in your yard. You're in a parking lot, a street, wherever you are, and you're not competing with somebody per se on a timed course like a real car. You know, you're not on a track, basically.
Right. You're just out there for
which
fun.
moves you into racing, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yep.
So back to bashing. There's so many bashing cars, and really you can bash with any car, realistically.
Yeah.
Obviously some better than others. You really gotta, what type of car do you like the look of? Usually is what I start out with. Do you like the truck look? Do you like the buggy look? There's truggies, monster trucks, street cars, the list goes on. So usually, and then I usually, okay, you like the monster truck type. So then I kind of go into, what brand do you like? Or, not what brand do you like? Sorry, I choked up on myself there. It's more of, these are the good brands.
Right.
Take a look at Arma, Traxxas. Those are the top two bashing brands in my opinion. We got Losi. What else is out there? Viterra. There's really so many different bashing brands, but I really try to direct them towards Traxxas and Arma personally. And I know you guys are probably yelling at it is some brand I forgot to say. But those are the two major ones for us.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the stuff. So for, we talked about this earlier too, is you have a couple of different groups of people that are going to walk into a hobby shop or that are going to go online shopping. You have, I call them like the parent guardians that they're buying for a little guy or maybe a teenager at the oldest or something. So they have no clue, which is where this is kind of hopefully helpful to somebody that watches it, because there are so many questions. So you also are having to consider, is the end user going to be the one picking it out? Can they, tell you, I'm into motocross, I like big jumps, stuff like that, and now I want to get into RC? Or is it a parent who says, my kid likes bright red?
Right.
And it completely changes the way that you steer the conversation, because now you're worried, you're thinking more about, budget. You have to have that in mind too.
Which is really the next question. Once I point out a couple brands, what are you really looking to spend? Because most of those brands have cars in every category almost.
Yeah.
Like Traxxas, for example, they start with like the Latrax cars for I think they're around $150, and it goes all the way up to X-Max for $1,000.
Yep.
Plus you need the batteries and what, so you're $1,400 and something like that.
Right.
So you really gotta, what do you want to spend? That's quite a gap, and they have cars to fill in all between. Usually, once they determine what kind of car you like, I would say you like the pickup truck look, which is pretty popular. The short course, which we were just talking about in the beginning.
Yep, they look cool.
You really can't go wrong with something like a Slash. At the end of the day, they start with 2-wheel drive Slashes. They got 4-wheel drive brushless. There's I think four or five just in that one category.
Right.
Which is the whole reason we're having this show, because there's so many different cars, and there's 5 cars in that one brand in that one category.
Right, and they all look identical.
Yeah.
So if whoever it is that's going to use the thing picks out a color, you still have to drill down further into the details. One of the things when I've talked to, coworkers or people that ultimately I, recommend to come down to RCMadness, one of the things that I point out to them is know your child, know your audience's ability. So if it's a first time user, they're really young, you may want to steer them toward brushed, which is that word is the word you need to know. Is it's a brushed power system, brushed motor.
Yep.
They're typically going to be less maintenance in the short term. They're going to be less power. They're not going to be as ridiculous. Of course, with less power means less responsibility. You're less likely to break parts as easily. So, again, if you're shopping for a kid for Christmas or birthday, stuff like that, you kind of want to try to keep in mind how responsible is the kid, or are they the type that you don't leave alone in the room with the cat or whatever, and go from there. Whereas if they're a teenager, then you can probably get them a brushless system,
right,
which is going to be faster. Even the Valeni and Traxxas stuff rips pretty good.
You're talking something that'll do 60 miles an hour to the box with the correct battery.
Right, and the cool thing is a lot of those vehicles that are ridiculously fast out of the box, they're more expensive, so that's a bit of a trade-off too. But the electronics enable you to turn down the wick. So instead of full power, you get half power. So there is a training mode basically that you can enable, and it makes it easier for a new user,
right,
and then they can grow into it. So now you get back to the dollars and cents conversation. Do you want to start off with the inexpensive, maybe, see how it goes, see if they really enjoy it, or whether they play with it for a month and put it away?
Right.
There's just so many variables.
There really is, and I usually try to steer people towards going brushless initially, even if they're a younger age.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Well, mostly my reasoning is pretty much every brand is offering a way to turn the truck down power-wise now.
So there goes one of the big deciding factors.
Right. So, the truck is capable of doing 60 miles an hour, but that's with a 3-cell. And usually they supply a different gearing with the car in order to get that. So when it says 60, 70 miles on the box,
it's advertising.
They're kind of pushing it a little bit. It'll do it, but it's not just going to do it immediately.
With enough straightaway, with a good driver.
Right. So going back to like Traxxas and Arma, Traxxas has a mode on their cars that'll cut it down to half speed, and that's across the entire lineup. Every car, doesn't matter which Traxxas car you buy.
Right, because they all have the same ESC.
Right.
Or typically.
More or less, and they all work basically the same. And you can put smaller batteries in each of the car. You can go down to a 2-cell in a Traxxas and cut it down to 50% power. And that's taking the truck from that 60 mile an hour mark to 25-ish to 30-ish.
Right.
And taking a lot of the torque and wheel speed out of it.
Right.
And same with Arma. They got a switch on the radio. You go 75, 50, 75, and 100% on the power right on the radio.
Okay.
So that's something to keep in mind as well. Brushless just tends to be less maintenance in the long run because they're usually closed can motors.
Right. They don't follow with dirt and stuff like that.
And getting back to the bashing thing, generally you're going to be running this outside in the mud, in the dirt, and
That's true.
whatnot. And the brush motors will wear out, but they are a lot cheaper to replace as well. So.
Right.
But who wants to keep replacing the motors in their car? Nobody.
Right.
But circling back, if you want to get into bashing, obviously you're going to have to research a little bit what you want. But there's really a car for everything and a price range for everything. So you really got to figure out how much you want to spend and what type of car you like the look of or something like that. And then really what surface you're going to run it on. Because that's kind of important too.
Yeah, that's true.
Because a lot of people living in a city area or something like that, it's going to be probably on the road, mostly in the street and stuff like that.
Yeah, tennis court, and whatever.
Yeah, and they make they make street cars and generally street tires for said off-road vehicles too.
Yeah.
Generally, I try to point towards off-road vehicles because an off-road vehicle you can definitely run on the street,
right,
and you can run it off-road. If you buy a street car only, you're very limited to only the road. They don't go off-road very well. You're not going to rip it through the lawn.
Not for long.
You get your Traxxas 4Tech. While it's a good car, you're not going to rip it through the yard and then play with it on the street. You buy a Slash, rip it through the yard, hit the street. It's not going to know the difference.
Right, and there's something to be said for that because when you have that flexibility,
right,
it doesn't matter. If you pack up your life and you move somewhere else, you can still take the thing out. It doesn't become an irrelevant hobby.
And that's the thing about picking, segue into that, picking a good brand. because say, like you had mentioned, just picking up and moving, going somewhere else. Say you're moving from the hobby shop that you bought it at, and you're moving to a different state, and you found a new hobby shop. Chances are they're gonna sell Traxxas or Arma or anything that's majorly distributed, and you're gonna pay a little bit of a premium for the brand initially, as opposed to buying, like we were talking about, like a cheaper Chinese brand.
Yeah, we can go down that rabbit hole.
We'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, like I said, parts availability is a big thing too.
Yep.
So I'll let Tyler go down that road a little bit with the off-brand kind of cars.
Yeah. So in the early on in the hobby, it didn't seem that, I'm going to say, knockoff or fly-by-night manufacturers were as prevalent. And now for someone getting into the hobby, you know, like everybody shops on Amazon. So it's a natural thing to go, well, I'm going to go on Amazon and RC car, and up pops, I won't list names, but I mean, I think anybody watching this is either going to find out those names or they already know them.
Yeah, I don't want to make anybody feel bad.
You know, if it has toys in the name. But they'll find an RC car that, you know, it looks nice. It looks like, you know, aluminum materials, the metal is all anodized, it's pretty, and it's ready to run. It comes with a battery. It's $120 or something like that. And, you know, they look at that and they go, all right, well, that's $120. It's brushless. It comes with a lithium battery. It comes with all this stuff that everybody tells me I want. Why do I want to go and spend $350, $400, whatever, on something that on paper looks equivalent? And what it boils down to is when you start dealing with super duper low cost manufacturers, part support is usually a massive struggle. You're not going to walk into a place like this and get parts for them because you guys may not even be able to get parts for them. They're typically, they sell the car,
right,
and they don't want to see you again until you're going to buy another car. They're disposable items. You know, and this is me kind of being the old man in a rocking chair shaking his fist at cars driving by, but those brands typically don't support the hobby. So when they do a huge race here at RCMadness, different manufacturers, brands, whatever, they'll, you know, donate product and items, you know, for raffles or for the winners of the races and in different classes. It contributes to the hobby. And a lot of these offshore brands that are just bargain basement price, they don't. So they're not helping your local hobby shop where you're going to go, where people work, where, you know, racers ultimately have a place to come. You know, this is kind of, it's a business, but it's a club. We care about this place too. So those fly-by-night brands don't serve the hobby. I don't want to say take from, that sounds really harsh, but they're there to make a buck. They're not there to support the hobby. There's no love there. And I think, you know, you see Traxxas promotes at least their brand a ton, which draws people into RC.
right,
And then they can grow out from there. You know, they're the big brands, the established brands help keep this hobby going, you know, even when there's a dip in popularity or whatever. So to me, a big brand, an established brand is important, not just for the end user experience, but it's good for everybody else too. It's good for the hobby.
right, and to kind of branch off what you said there a little bit, I do most of the mechanic work here, and these more off-brand cars they're actually much harder to work on for the most part usually. So when it comes down to like quality of a car, the engineering that goes into, I'm going to use Traxxas again because they're a very well-known brand. The engineering that goes into Traxxas, now they're not just engineering to be durable, they're usually engineering to be relatively easy to work on too.
Which they are.
Right.
You can tear down a Traxxas vehicle in minutes.
Right. And
with a Phillips screwdriver.
And them being so popular, there's usually some kind of online source to help you do what you're doing as well.
Yep.
And then I already touched on the parts availability of them, but also the quality. You had mentioned the metal parts and stuff like that. There is a significant difference in quality of metal parts, no matter what you're doing. Okay, yeah. There's cast aluminum and there's machined aluminum, and there's a big difference. Okay, yeah. Just because it has metal parts.
Yeah, metal parts are not the be all end all.
Does not mean it's indestructible. Okay.
Right.
where Traxxas can make a reinforced plastic part, and then they throw just a pot metal aluminum part on there. It's metal is not always the answer, is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, and the flip side too, again, like you look at a metal car that's all shinied up, and to the eye it seems the better value, but that metal car, when you whack something with it, you're going to bend 3, 4, 5 pieces that don't want to bend back.
Yeah.
And in comparison to the Traxxas, which I bust on Traxxas sometimes because, you pop a knuckle, pop a hub carrier.
Right.
But they have parts in the design of the vehicle that are intended to break, and they're usually the cheapest part on the car. Not cheapest, the most inexpensive part.
Yeah, you need somewhere easy to fix.
So, instead of wrecking a bunch of parts, that one fuse in the system, that one part pops, breaks, you can replace it in minutes at, whatever, $5 for a pair.
Right.
And you're back going again. And you can get that part either here or, whatever local hobby shop you're at.
And I like that you mentioned the cost there a little bit. The price of the parts on I'm going to call them Chinese cars. I mean, most of the stuff's coming from China anyway, but we'll call them Chinese cars.
Yeah.
The price of their parts are really not any cheaper than buying parts for a more premium car.
Right.
Honestly. So just because your Slash might cost you $300 and the other car costs you $150 to replace the arm, it still might cost you $10 for a pack, no matter which brand you go.
Right. Well, and there's so this was a few years back, but there is a huge problem in general with foreign entities copying designs, copying intellectual property. Not just in this hobby, but just in I see it in aerospace. I see it in all kinds of different auto sports cars, things like that. A few years ago, there was a company called Intech, and they came out with a 2-wheel drive racing buggy that looked phenomenal. It was an absolute copy, down to the advertising literature, same fonts, same color schemes, same graphics as a Durango. Really? And Durango's a now out of business brand that they were a race brand.
They basically become Arma.
Yeah, they kind of live on that way. But
yeah, anyway.
So again, it's a little bit of a soapbox kind of conversation, but when you spend your money, you want to support the right part of the hobby, and I think that's one of the factors.
Yeah, so to kind of circle back and recap on bashing there, because we kind of went around there a little bit, you got to find, buying a quality brand car is going to be worth it in the end.
Yep.
Just parts availability, parts quality, customer service too.
Maintainability,
servicing the car, working on the car. It all makes a big difference. You're spending a little bit more upfront, but all of that's going to make your life easier.
That's actually, you kind of just dabbled into it, and it reminded me, we didn't directly talk about this. Warranty / knowledge support.
Right.
I have literally watched Chris, the owner here at RCMadness, I've watched Chris open up a brand new car because he didn't have one little part on the shelf to put somebody's car back together, and they were standing in front of him. I've seen the commitment that these guys have, and Tyler included, have to their customers is outstanding. And the same is true, if you buy a Traxxas car and the first time you plug it in, it goes up in smoke.
Right.
You get on the phone either with Tyler or Chris, you come down here, there isn't going to be an argument. You're not going to have to spend 45 minutes, on hold trying to get support, whereas with these other manufacturers, there probably isn't a phone number to call.
Yeah, and you're not even calling the shop that you got it from, but even just calling Traxxas.
Right.
I've personally had to call them. I know customers that have, and like you said, they plug it in, speed control. Sometimes you get a dud. That's just the way it is sometimes.
Yeah.
And they have had no problem just mailing you a new one.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, for some of the cheaper brands, I can't really talk for them too much because I don't really deal with them too much. But I've definitely heard some stories from people.
Yep.
They just completely ignore them or something like that. But
yeah.
Everybody's experience is going to vary on that one a little bit. But yeah. I know Traxxas support and Horizon, it's a major company, blankets a lot of brands.
Yep.
Pretty good. So customer support is definitely something to think about when buying a car too.
Yep.
So that's pretty much bashing. You really just gotta think about what kind of car you want, where you're going to use it, pick a quality brand, and if you can find somebody that is knowledgeable in the brand, that's going to be super helpful too. Or just reach out to one of us too.
Yeah, that's one of the other things I've noticed is when you talk, like when I've talked to people and I recommended they come in here, it's like, just be patient, because there's only so many people working here at a time. There's usually people queued up, asking for parts. But Tyler and Chris are always willing to just chat. There's no, what do you want? Here's your part, get going. If somebody comes in and they have a genuine question, or they're not.
Tyler's really buttering me up today.
Well, I mean, it's the truth. I wouldn't keep spending my time here and my money here if I didn't think it was good people.
We like talking RC, obviously. I mean, look what we're here doing. You know what I mean? We like spreading the knowledge. You have to be willing to learn it, though. If you're coming and seeking information,
that's a good segue.
And like, if somebody's coming to me and they're seeking information about getting their first car, and I'm telling them, I'm giving you my opinion, basically.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even all of this is our opinion.
And then, I don't know really the way to word this, but I think you know what I'm trying to get at. Not so much that they're going to argue with you about what you're telling them, but almost trying to come off like they know more already or something like that. I don't really know how to word that. Mostly, if you're seeking information and help from somebody else, take the information and help and process it for yourself. You don't need to to counter what the person is telling you right there, or you know what I'm
saying?
That's how I really should word that, but
that's true. I
see it a lot in the shop sometimes where someone's asking for my help and then I give them my opinion about it, but then I'm wrong. You know what I mean?
This is why I'm glad I don't deal with the public on a regular basis.
I'm not.
No offense.
I'm not trying to. I'm just giving you my opinion about what I do and what I'm selling.
Well, and you're giving it with the right motive.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're trying to give them advice so that they can make the decision, make an informed decision, and get something that in the long run they're going to have fun with, they're going to have a good time with. Right. It only the long timers who have been here for a while get, I call it like the Chris Marcy hard sell, where I walk up to the counter and I'm like, I was thinking about, maybe upgrading my radio or doing this or doing that, and Chris will like pull something out and put it up and be like, it'll change your life.
Change your life.
When a new customer comes in to a good shop, a reputable shop, if they don't ask you questions, if they don't try to figure out what you're trying to do, and they just say, oh, you want one of these.
Right.
I'm not going to say run, but I would say, maybe go home and do more homework.
You can question it. Yeah. There's no problem with questioning, like, my opinion.
Yeah, why is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And just go
why should I get that car?
Yep.
Why are you saying that? I have no problem with that. I have answers to back up all my opinions about this. Right.
Well, and like you said too, you need to be willing to learn, right? So at an entry level, it's getting the lay of the land of the hobby.
Right.
But once you get into the hobby, and this is for any parent, I'll say parent or guardian that's watching this right now, if you're gonna get a young person, an RC car, please take the time to get them some basic tools, and if it breaks, if you feel comfortable doing it, and even if you don't, because you really can't mess much up, try to work on it. Try to teach, because that's one of the best things I've always said about RC, is it's a way to teach a young person. One, it's a way to get them off of their tablet, smartphone, or other device. But it's a way to teach them mechanical skills.
For sure.
Right? How something comes apart, how to get it back together, how to remember that. It's mechanical, it's electrical, and troubleshooting and problem solving. And those are skills, when they go into later, grade school, if they go to, a trade, or college, whatever the case, it's good to know how to turn a screwdriver.
Yeah, just even know the names of basic tools and stuff. I see it a lot, but not to get too deep into that. But
yeah, so that's another thing is if you're gonna, and most of the cars come with, a basic little toolkit, a couple of the essentials to get you going, take the wheels off, put them back on, stuff like that.
And if you are getting your first car and you're intending to bash on it and even race it or anything really, it's gonna break. So
yeah, be ready.
Don't buy a car and which one's not gonna break?
That's probably not a fair question, huh?
They're all going to break.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, just by picking a quality brand with parts availability is the only real way that nothing is indestructible. I'll tell you that much.
And don't get discouraged if something does go wrong. You know, the adult or the kid or whoever, you know, like Tyler said, you're going to break stuff. Yeah. You know, early on, your motor skills, even just for driving and controlling the vehicle, aren't there. We see people come in and they put a car down on the carpet track for the first time, and you know the turn is coming up. It's obvious there's a turn there. You need to turn, and they go the opposite direction. They hit the wall. It's because those reflexes, those motor skills aren't there. So don't be too hard on the little guy if he blasts a tree. It probably wasn't because he thought it would be funny. It's probably because he thought he was turning the correct direction, and you know it's just the muscle memory is not there too. So it's good to have reasonable expectations.
So everything kind of just wraps around to picking a quality brand.
It does.
Things are going to break. Ask about parts availability because they're going to break. Parts quality, there is different quality in parts too. But it doesn't matter if you buy the most expensive parts out there. I've seen everything really break. $200-$300 chassis get bent in half after smashing a fire hydrant. You know what I mean? It happens. And we're talking about grown people here. We ain't talking about 10-year-old kids. We're talking about grown men here.
Adults can afford the more expensive stuff that's faster and that hits harder.
Right. Yeah. We take them out, we jump them as high as we can, and they smash into the ground, and we rip the tires off of them. It's part of the hobby.
It is. That's definitely an element of it, too.
But it's something that you work up to. So all in all, in bashing, for the bashing category, find something you like, find a brand, ask about parts availability, and try to find somebody that knows the hobby and can direct you a little bit and teach you how to drive it a little bit, and just take your time with it, really. Yeah.
And I would say, so true or false, bashing is probably where the vast majority of people start.
Bashing is probably, I'd say 80-90% of the market.
Yeah.
Only because racing requires you to have a facility of some kind.
Yeah, you need somewhere to go.
Or your backyard. There's some backyard tracks, but that's a mix with racing and bashing backyard stuff, because that usually turns into bashing. But so anyway, moving on from bashing, of course, if you guys have any more questions or anything about that, feel free to comment or message me or anything. Call the shop, whatever.
Yeah, we'll try to troll the comment section and chime in.
So moving on to another category, racing, which I know Tyler P is very much into, which is a whole nother category of RC, in my opinion. It's going to require a lot more initiative, I'm going to say, to get into, ambition.
Yeah.
It's definitely a deeper rabbit hole than bashing. You're definitely going to have to find some kind of hobby shop or race facility, club, or really anything. I know a lot of shops don't necessarily have racetracks, and then there's clubs. There's I think Maximus, like in Maine, they're just a club. They don't have a shop. They just got a group of guys that run a track and they do club racing. So there's definitely some options. Like, you're gonna have to Google your area for that. But for the sake of the show, we're gonna talk about Madness, our racetracks. So getting into racing, generally, if somebody's getting into racing, they've had a car before.
Yeah,
99% of the cases.
Racing's usually not. You don't just jump in cold.
Yeah, every once in a while I get someone just coming in off the street and I want one of those and race it. With that being said, you got to find, again, what kind of racing do you want to do, because there's so much racing.
Well, so let's go through what do you guys have here?
Right. So racing here anyway. Let's see if I can even rattle them all off the top of my head. There's just so many tracks here. We'll start with carpet off-road racing, which is probably the biggest track, and not biggest track, biggest turnout.
Draw.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. And then we have carpet on-road, which is also on-road and oval racing.
Right. I was going to say oval. When he says on-road, it could be like touring cars, road
We also
course.
are running the minis on that track as well.
Yeah, and you can throw in some ramps. The minis are actually an awesome first potential car, because you can drive them around in the living room.
Which we'll circle back to. We'll circle back to.
Cool.
All right, so we got the mini racing. We got A-scale dirt racing,
That's the big track.
Big track outside. And we also have the turf track. And the turf and the carpet off-road track are for 10 scale.
Yep.
The turf is outside, and we run the same cars on both of those. We also have an outdoor asphalt on-road track, and recently this year, a drag racing track,
which is amazing to watch.
Which is a whole new category. We just put that in April. That's crazy. That's exploded the last year.
Full pro tree, just like the real thing. It's not, a guy standing at the end waiting to see like visually what car.
It's official.
100% legit.
Yeah, I definitely have a video or two up on the channel, RCMadness channel, about that. Check out our strip. But coming back, it's very easy to go off a tangent with all this different stuff they got. But getting into the racing, Tyler had mentioned just a minute ago about the minis, which is it's probably the cheapest that you can get into racing, at least here.
And with a quality car that's flexible, can do multiple things. Yeah.
I guess really at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what they're racing locally is really what's going to push you.
Right.
Here, Madness, we're really spoiled. Realistically,
you could walk in here with practically any car.
Right.
And, weather outside notwithstanding, have your pick of what you want to do.
You can pretty much race whatever you see a picture of and you want to race.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
So really, you got to find out what they're racing locally. I'd say 10 scale racing is probably the most popular. Maybe 8 scale, I'm not sure. I'm going to say 10 scale is more popular.
If I had to guess, I would say it's probably 10th. You're going to see probably a mix of off-road dirt, where it might be hard packed,
right.
Like really kind of like racing on concrete almost.
Yeah, which we don't do here, so I don't know much about. But
but then so when Tyler talks about the carpet track, it's literally a carpeted flat surface that they build jumps and turns and all kinds of stuff, and they throw carpet over the jumps and the bumps and all that. So it's kind of like carpeted motocross or carpeted supercross. The turf track that he referred to is literally covered in AstroTurf, fake grass. And it sounds silly. It sounds like it shouldn't work. But we got to get some WD-40. But the turf track is even bigger than the carpet track, so you can really get, some speed going, and it's tons of fun.
And that being outside, we only race on it half the year, too.
Right. Well, that's the other factor here.
Right.
We're in New England.
Weather. We are in New England.
So
the weather is very fun.
Yeah.
You get every season in full force.
Yeah, and I mean, even like when you're in the winter, you're indoors, you're on carpet. Is the carpet consistent? Well, it's as consistent as the humidity, the temperature. So there's another rabbit hole.
No, Tyler's getting deep into that.
But
anyway, getting into racing.
Yeah.
It's going to boil down to where you can race it, honestly.
Yeah, where and what. What's popular in your area. So that's a thing where if you do pack up your life and move, you may find yourself, having to reevaluate what you want to do and what you're going to get into.
Yeah. So at least here, talking from an RCMadness perspective, I usually direct people towards 10 scale racing. Usually some form of two-wheel drive stock buggy racing tends to be the most popular, at least here in New England. And at least a 2 to 3 hour radius, there's probably 5 tracks or so you can race a 10 scale buggy.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, on any given day. So there's a bit of traveling around you can do, and I know throughout the country there's 10 scale racing. I know Chris and his son, who's also named Tyler, are going to be going to Florida to do some racing, and they're running 10 scale carpet, I believe, beach line.
There's 4 Tylers here. It's really bad.
Yes.
I'm the original, oldest.
I'll give him that. But so 10 scale buggy racing, usually some form of stock racing is going to be the easiest to get into.
So now when you say stock, what does stock mean?
Stock for two wheels, 17.5.
So it's a reference to
national rules.
The size of the motor in the car, essentially.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the car has to be exactly the way it came out of the box.
No.
There are other stock classes where stock means you can't touch the car, you have to run it the way that
there's a specific set of national rules that, depending on where you are either tightly or loosely followed, depending on the club or the day.
Which again boils down to reach out to your local club, your local hobby shop. They're going to be the ones that'll tell you, look, it's this is what we have, this is what we do.
Right.
These are the rules that we follow or don't follow.
Yeah, and it depends on, some days are better than others too for racing. Like here at Madness, we race like carpet buggy Tuesday nights, Friday nights, and Sundays.
Yeah.
And we have various, we call them trophy events throughout. And usually at a bigger trophy event, the rules are followed way more tightly. They have a tech table, your car's inspected before the racing, yada yada. But you come on a Tuesday night, we're more or less just kind of hanging out with each other, enjoying our RC cars. We don't scrutinize each other's cars unless someone is blatantly cheating on the track by just ripping wheelies by somebody else. Then they get called out.
Right.
But we more or less know everybody. It's more of a community thing. In much larger events, not to say it's not a community thing, but say like we have the J Concept Nationals here.
Yeah.
It's a lot more serious. I'll put it that way. People, I don't know, just taking it more seriously. I don't know, they don't really gain much from it. But we get a lot of big names here, and people want to, I don't know, prove themselves, I suppose is the best way to put that.
Which is another thing to kind of keep in mind if you're looking into it. Like if you come in here, or you go, watch on YouTube videos of, some of these dedicated racing cars, you say, that's what I want to do. Like Tyler said, it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes years to learn, to really be a student of the game, I'll say. So, there's nothing wrong with trying it out. Typically here, again, one of the benefits of Madness is they have, cars that, if you want to rent them or try them out, you can get a feel for what it's about before you spend the money, on a specialized vehicle.
Just before we started doing the show, I had a gentleman out here just running my car that I had just raced. He just wanted to try one out. People see him running, and generally we have a car ready to go. Sometimes we don't, but usually I'm willing to lend out my car, and it's a full-on race car, top of the line, everything in it.
Yep.
And I'm not afraid. Just let people try it. It's a toy car.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, but like you said about the discipline and wanting to, you're not going to be a professional throwing it right on the track.
And no,
it takes a lot of practice to get that car to go around efficiently.
Yeah, and I've noticed in the last 5 years or so that there's a trend here, at least, and it's probably true of other hobby shops, where there are the diehards, the people that you will see every week, every season. They always come back. But then you have these new faces that, every season, because I usually take the summers off. I play with full-size cars. So I come back every fall, and it's like, 30% of these faces are new. So there's always a certain amount of turnover. There's people that are learning. But what I've seen is, there's a lot to learn, but it's a relatively quick process. If you watch somebody on day one versus 3 months later, there's usually a huge improvement. Now, that isn't to say that they're ready to go out and compete with, a pro that's fully sponsored and travels the country, but you can go from, this is really hard, I'm frustrated, to I'm enjoying this now very quickly. So for anybody out there that's, just got the car or a race buggy or whatever, if you're discouraged because you're not getting fast as quickly as you'd like, hang in there. And that's another thing with having the shop here and the community here. That's really, I think, a key word is community. Almost every person here, if you walked up to them, if you saw that they've got their poop in a group and their car's quick, if you walked up to them and asked for advice, you're probably going to have to tell them at some point to shut up and that it's enough. Because they'll just, oh, well, sure, what do you want to do? And this and this and this and this, and I run this battery and this motor and this is how I gear it, and blah, blah, blah. So there's a ton of support. So don't feel when you walk in the doors at a hobby shop or a club or whatever where you're going to race, don't feel like you have to keep to yourself.
Right.
It's way more fun when you make some friends, some people, you can heckle them when they're on the track and they flip the car over and they're driving like animals.
And you just have to consistently come. You're not.
That's true.
Not everybody's gonna approach you and be your friend on the first night. It's just
no. It takes time.
Not realistic here.
No.
I mean.
But they'll help you if you're struggling.
Oh, for sure.
You don't have to be a known face for someone to help you out.
Right.
They might not split a pizza with you on day one, but
I will. You come see me, I'll share pizza with anybody. What?
I have OCD, so I will not. But yeah.
That's all right.
It's
anyway.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's community, and you can't be afraid to race either. I see a lot of people, I'm not good.
That holds
can't
me
race.
back.
I'm not ready. I'm not good. See, I'm the opposite. I don't care.
Don't care. Throw it down. Send it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna crash into somebody. Oh, I'm not good. Let me tell you, even I'm not nearly the best around here either. I'll work on your car till I'm blue in the face, but I'm not the best driver. I'm decent.
Right.
But even at the highest level, they still crash into each other.
Yep.
Okay. And I don't know, maybe we should talk about how racing works real quick.
Yeah.
Like, so when we set up an event, all right, so we usually do 2 to 3 qualifying races and a main event. Okay. So it's 4 races total generally. Sometimes we only do 2, but we're going to say 3 and a main is a typical race. Okay, so your qualifying races, the first qualifying race is completely a randomized order. Every driver is put in a pool and the computer spits out a sheet.
Within the same class.
So they say there's 3 races. There's 2 two-wheel drive buggy races and a 4-wheel drive buggy. Everybody is completely random. So then we run that qualifier, which consists of a 5-minute race.
Mm-hmm.
Your laps and times are saved. And then once that whole qualifier is done, we move on to round 2. Call it round 2, okay? Now in this round, it is no longer random, okay? It is based on the amount of laps you did in that time. All right? So that's what they call the pace.
Right. So they'll basically take out of the group of people in your class.
Right.
They'll take the top 6, and they get to run their second qualifier together. The next 6, they run their second qualifier together.
Fast is slow to fast is how it's grouped.
Right.
Basically.
So you're out there, the second round, you're out there with people who are, in theory, approximately the same pace as you are.
Right.
Which makes it easier because you're not dealing with lap traffic and you're not dealing with people coming up behind you where now you have to move over and it creates anxiety and whatever.
And then, for the third round it progresses, and then the main event you are organized in starting position by your laps in time that you did in qualifying. So The fastest guy will be in first, and the slowest guy will be in 10th in the lineup, just for argument's sake. So it's not overly complicated. It's pretty easy. It's just that first round can be a little intimidating, but you're literally thrown in a mixed bag of, you could be running with the best driver here and the worst driver here in one race.
Literally, right.
So it doesn't matter. And when you start coming, like on a Tuesday night I run the racing, I know 99% of the people here on a Tuesday night, and I know if you're a new driver, and I try to group people accordingly. So depending on what club you're in, they may have a novice class, or they may know to put you maybe in a little bit slower of a heat, which isn't bad.
Right.
Don't take that as a bad thing. So that's something, maybe approach the race director at the beginning of the night and, maybe, hey, can you maybe put me in a slower qualifier or a lower qualifier? And, it might be to your advantage.
Yeah, and I mean, again, so Chris runs the show Friday nights, Tyler runs it on Tuesday nights, and other various events, it's different people, but talk to the race director. The race director is just, it's either going to be the owner of the hobby shop or it's going to be somebody working there.
Some regular guy, honestly.
They're the ones sitting at the laptop taking signups. So you're, if you're there at 7 o'clock when it's time to start racing, or you decide you're going to start racing, get up there half an hour early. You're going to give them your entry fee, and they're going to put you into the computer so that they can sort everybody out and kick the show off on time. That's another thing that you have to keep in mind is you also need a transponder in the car, which is a piece of equipment that most people aren't familiar with if they're coming from the bashing community. So basically, just like in real world, auto sports and stuff like that, there's a little device that gets put in the car that sends a signal to the computer of the track every time you complete a lap. That's how they get your lap times. That's how they, basically figure out who's winning and who's not winning.
It is an expensive little piece of hardware as well.
But they're pretty durable. They really don't tend to fail. I don't think I've ever, knock on wood, I've never had one fail.
Yeah.
And you can swap them between cars and stuff like that too.
It is about $100 to get a transponder.
Yep.
Two things based on that. One, they do hold their value quite well. If you do want to get out of racing, you can usually sell
somebody's
one
always trying to pick up one
very quickly for like $80. That's beside the point. But if you are new to racing and you did build a car and maybe you just don't quite have that extra $100 to spend on a transponder, at least here, usually either somebody at the shop, myself, Chris, whatever, or somebody in the pits will let you borrow one for the evening.
Yeah.
Once you've been into racing, you usually start collecting 2, 3, we get a bunch of them. And myself, I'm oiling. I'll let you use the transponder for the evening. Just make sure you give it back to me. That's all.
Yeah.
So definitely don't be afraid to talk to people if you're getting into racing. Is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it really does. Because so one of the things over the years I've gone through phases where I don't do much racing at all, and then I go through phases where I get really into it. Like this year, for some reason, I hit it, and I've been kind of hot trying to figure out the car, and it's like a book you never finish reading. You're always learning stuff. You're always refining your game.
And there's always a new car, too.
And, right. So
just when you think you got to figure it out.
Unless you're running a 5-year-old B6.
With a brand new one sitting in the box.
Yeah, I know. Anyway. But that's when I've been less motivated to be here is usually when it's like the guys that I used to run with don't show up as much anymore. So
it's definitely fun to get more friends involved with it.
It does. It is. And
sure.
like right now I've got a couple of coworkers that they've been established in the hobby for a long time. I am too. So like we pit together, we order, Chinese food together. It's that kind of camaraderie and like I said,
right.
like busting each other's chops if, somebody has a bad heat or they can't get their act together. In a kind way. Yeah, the heckling can be pretty epic, but
it's really just hanging out, honestly.
That's real. It is. That it's so much more. I've had more fun on nights where I qualified well. I finished poorly in the main, or I didn't finish the main, or whatever. But it's like the guys you're friends with had a really good run, or one of the guys that helped you tune your car. He's out there on a heater of a run, and he's watching the battles on the track between people.
Yeah, that is exciting.
So awesome, especially if you get into some close racing where the cars are inches off each other, and it's who's going to make a mistake first. And
just last night we were racing this regular Tuesday night club racing, and Justin and Tom, one of the faster guys running, they're running 4-wheel, and it must have the 3.5 minute battle, and that was a 5-minute race, I think. And everybody in the store is
probably yelling, and they were watching. And
I was out there marshalling, and I'm yelling and going back and forth because I know everybody here. I would say at this point, but yeah, it was pretty. It's exciting when they start chasing each other and things get really close.
Yeah, and I mean, you get those moments in bashing and stuff like that. But when there's something about when the clock is running that there's a tension, and there's as soon as the bell goes off and the race is over and everybody parks their cars.
That's really the difference between bashing and racing.
Yeah,
you got a time. You're racing other people. You don't want to crash, and it's on a closed course.
And it really is. It's a great way to hone your driving skills.
Oh, for sure.
And this is a whole nother podcast, a whole nother video. But it's just like motocross or supercross, where you put in some rear brake, the nose falls. If you hit the gas and accelerate, the nose comes up. So there's a lot of English that you can put on the car. Yeah. And if you get to the point where the car is in the air for 1/1000, maybe 1 second, and you're putting in steering and throttle inputs at the same time. It's also going to up your basher game if then you go out and you're trying to do backflips and stuff like that.
Do some backflips or whip it in the air or something. It's all throttle and steering.
Exactly. And that's all stuff that comes with time.
Yeah, being able to save the truck from landing on its roof or landing on its wheels is
right.
Usually a fistful of throttle.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Suspension works best in one direction.
Yeah. But just to recap on racing, the first thing you got to do is figure out where you're going to race it. Yep. And what kind of surface or track they have. That's going to be flat out the first thing. Is there a racetrack, and what is the racetrack?
Right.
Once that's determined, you can then figure out what kind of car, which comes back to picking a quality brand. But if you're going to get into racing, the majority of the racing brands are pretty quality.
But it may also boil down to, since they're all quality,
which track is supported.
The tracks tend to support. So right here, here, there's a lot of Associated and Schumacher, and I would say Associated, Schumacher, and then maybe like Yokomo, Losi after that.
Really, again, here we're kind of spoiled because we buy everything.
Well, right.
But Associated and Schumacher, at least for 10 scale racing, is the most popular here.
They definitely
with
tend
a mix
to dominate.
of TLR, X-Ray.
Oh, X-Ray. How could I forget them? Yeah.
Yeah, TLR, X-Ray, and I feel like I'm missing somebody, but Yokomo.
Right.
That's probably like 10-20% of it, and then the rest, 80% of it's Associated and Schumacher.
Yeah, and that's because we have a couple of factory Schumacher drivers, right. And
I myself run Associated.
Yeah, most of my stuff is Associated. I do have the Associated four-wheel, which Schumacher.
Which is something you got to look into too. What is the majority of people running? Because if the majority of people are running said Associated car, that's what the majority of the parts are going to be available, and the majority of the help that they're going to get.
Thank you. I was going to say that's also the knowledge base. Right. So there are websites like Petit RC where you can get setups.
Hey, we got setups on our site now too.
And you can get them on RCMadness.
My setup's on there too.
Where they're relevant.
Award-winning setup, Tyler C's award-winning setup. If you want to be in the B main, B fast.
B1 better than A8.
I always get the bump. But anyway.
Yeah, you want that knowledge base because the race cars especially are insanely adjustable.
Oh yeah. And almost to the point where it's intimidating, really.
Yeah.
But most of the time, out of the box, they're relatively good.
Yeah.
If you're coming from bashing or anything else, it's gonna feel phenomenal.
You won't know the difference. Yeah. They're 90% of the way there.
I don't know how many times I hand my car to somebody, and it's not crazily set up or anything like that, but they're coming from a Slash or some kind of Arma bashing vehicle or whatever, and I hand them that buggy, and it's, oh my God.
It's on rails.
This is incredible. The best thing I've ever driven.
Yeah.
But once you get deeper into racing, you'll decide what car is better for you and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit of trial and error, unfortunately, but you'll figure it out.
Yep. I mean, everybody needs something to kind of like obsess over. So whether it's having a fleet of bashers or having one of every kind of carpet off-road race car.
I mean, and if you're lucky enough to come across a facility like ours, you pretty much end up with one of everything.
Yeah. Or at least you certainly can if you want to.
You can come spend the day here and bash, race, and rock crawl, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
So really just find a place to race, find out what they're racing, what brands they're racing. That's pretty much it. And then you got to go from there, find somebody knowledgeable. And
a lot of it boils down to networking and trying to find people. Facebook
talk
groups.
Some friends into it because it's way more fun with a couple buddies.
Yep.
Honestly. So it's order pizza, hang out, do some racing.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's pretty cool.
End up on YouTube together.
Oh, making it happen. But so that moves into kind of the last group I wanted to talk about. Sorry, that's something on my tongue there. Is rock crawling, which has kind of become its own category.
I'm gonna punch out now.
Oh,
I'm completely ignorant of everything rock crawling. I know they go slow and they go over stuff.
I'm kind of into everything naturally, just because I have to be.
Renaissance man.
What's the saying? Jack of all trades,
master of none. Yeah.
But anyway, rock crawling, and when I'm saying rock crawling, there's a couple of different rock crawlers. There's scale trucks, there's comp crawlers, and I don't know. There's probably a third one. I'm gonna say like trail trucks. It can kind of go the same as scaling, but
where they all have in common. Correct me if I'm wrong. That they're supposed to be more realistic. They're not as cartoony, right?
Yes and no, because you have like the comp ones, which are full big tire buggies with low chassis.
Almost like rock bouncers
in
the real world.
Yeah. Then you have, when I say scale truck, there's really two different. There's competition scale trucks, and then there's scale to look scale. Okay. And depending on what you're doing with it or what you want out of it, if you want to build a truck, say you have a real truck, you want to build a real truck to look like it, you can definitely go down that road. Or like we do competitions here with the scale trucks Thursday nights, and then trophy competitions on various Sundays.
So for somebody getting into crawl, like if someone was really big into modeling,
for sure, that's an
paint and glue, etc. Crawling actually might be a good place to start because they tend to be more detailed bodies, and you can customize the bejesus out of them. I mean, little miniature winches.
Oh my God, it's endless with the amount of stuff that you can buy for them.
That's right, Kenny.
It's unbelievable. But, really, you got to decide what you want to do with the crawling.
Okay, yeah.
But crawling is, in my opinion, a much easier decision if you want to get in. There's not, I'm going to say not as many crawlers, okay? Because I know Axial and Traxxas are the biggest ones in the game. So you really got to come down. There's not really, the price is not as much of a factor in scaling or crawling, I'm going to say, as much as bashing, because most quality scale trucks are between 300 and 500.
So it's kind of a narrower window that you're
really
in.
What you're paying for sometimes when it comes to the crawling and the scale stuff is a lot of these companies have licensing for bodies and the scale look. Like Traxxas does the
like an
Bronco, the Blazer,
Ford or
Axial's got Jeep Lockdown, the JL's the Gladiator.
Yep.
And then, but most of these brands have a truck that's unlicensed. Traxxas has the TRX4 Sport, which in my opinion,
generic body.
Which in my opinion is the way to go, hands down. Not to take anything from Axial, but it's a quality truck too. But the Sport is an unlicensed body, but the same truck as with the licensed body. With the only difference being with the licensed body, Traxxas does have a 2-speed and locking and unlocking differentials.
So you'll see a little variation,
which is cool
in terms of like options and capabilities.
You get a few more options, but I think the TRX4 Sport, at least at the time of this video right now, I think is 370. And then they have various models with licensed bodies up to, I think, 550 or 600.
Is that ready to run?
It's ready to run minus battery and charger. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Pretty good for what it is.
You do need a battery and charger with a lot of these vehicles now. Bashing, racing, crawling, doesn't matter.
Yeah, they'll all need a battery, and not all cars use the same. It's not like they all use the same stick pack like way back in the day.
Well, I mean, if you're doing bashing and crawling, the batteries can be pretty close to the same. Racing is
the race cars are the different deal.
But moving on from that, when you're getting into rock crawling, you got to decide: am I going to compete with this truck? Am I going to trail this truck? Am I just going to build it to put it on a shelf and just look wicked cool?
Yeah. Because
you can put your life savings into a rock crawler. They make aluminum axles, hard bodies. You can spend thousands on these things, and I build them for people all the time.
Brass option parts.
Oh my God, so many parts.
Yep.
So if you're in, and another thing with a crawler is they don't really break very much because they're pretty slow. You're not usually jumping this thing at 60 miles an hour, 100 feet in the air.
Right.
Because you can't.
The bodies get scratched up from tumbling off stuff. That's probably...
Usually you're stripping a gear, breaking an axle housing. Really not much. Where the money comes in for rock crawling is if you like to add upgrades to a vehicle, it is endless with rock crawling. And I'm going back to the Traxxas, the Sport, because the Sport and the Axial cars, really an unlimited amount of parts you can buy for these things.
Mm-hmm.
Brass weighted parts, scale brake rotors. They got real bead locks. They got licensed. Proline makes licensed tires for these things.
That like actually say BF Goodrich or whatever.
Proline's got Ford, Chevy, Dodge bodies. It's endless. So rock crawling is a really cool thing to get into. Sometimes it's the first thing people get into too. And it's really good for kids too. Rock crawling. That's
true. That's a good point.
If you got a young kid, I'm gonna say at a 5 to 10 range, somewhere, they just want. I see a lot of kids just grab a radio and just hold the throttle and turn the wheel around, like they're just having a ball, just driving it around.
Right, which you can do with a crawler.
And a rock crawler is great because you can literally just hold it wide open throttle and just turn the wheel and drive around in the grass. Nothing is really gonna stop it, and it doesn't really go fast enough where if they plow it into like the foundation on your house, it's just going to kind of hit it and stop and just spin the tires.
They just need to know enough to...
Worst case, you'll burn out a motor.
Right.
So that's a really good option too. And they make some mini versions of those too if you want to play in the house. They got the mini scale stuff is blowing up. 24 scale stuff, which is even its own thing now too. I would say stay with 10 scale initially, but the 24 scale is definitely something to think about too. But a little bit harder to work on because things are very small.
Micro,
literally. But yeah, I'd say, again, it's pretty much the same as bashing. Stay with a quality brand. And see what people are using around you. But crawling is a great thing to get into if you don't have a facility to go to.
Yeah, that's one of the few that if... they're multi-purpose. You can take it on a walk with you through the
Right.
woods, or if you have a facility, you can do competitions.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys that just buy, it's a family thing. They'll buy 2, 3 scale trucks, and then they'll just walk in the woods, and they come back and tell me, Tyler, I just bought this scale truck, and we ended up walking for 4 hours in the woods, and we didn't even realize it. We walked miles, and they love it. And that's another thing. The Rockwell is batteries last forever in these things because they're brush motors and they're geared so low and they're so slow. Yeah, they literally get an hour and a half out of a battery in these things. Wow. So you bring a few batteries in a backpack on a trail walk and you're having a family day out in the woods with a couple RC cars.
Yeah, that's actually a really good kind of good aspect of it.
It's just and they don't really break much unless you're really asking for it, which sometimes we do. But
some people do.
And I mean, yeah, but rock crawling has definitely grown a lot, and it's definitely something to consider. It's super fun. I got a lot of guys that come to me, oh, it's so slow. How can that even be fun? Again, I got a rock crawler, so I let them try it. Oh, pretty much, 9 times out of 10 they come back to me. Oh yeah, this is way more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
It's definitely something you have to try.
Well, and again, it's because they tend to look and behave like something relatable. There are people out there that had a Blazer, that had a Bronco, that have a pickup that they've lifted and put 33s on, or done whatever. So they walk in here, they're not going to relate to some like a trophy truck.
Right.
That I don't own a trophy truck. Maybe a bunch of you guys do, but
I wish I did.
A lot of people own 4-wheel drive trucks.
Right.
And now you have an inroad where you have a connection to the RC. It's not just a cartoon that you go out and you bash.
Yeah, and a lot of guys recreate their real trucks too.
Right.
Which is very possible. They don't make every truck, don't get me wrong, but it's very possible. They make a lot of popular ones.
Well, and a lot of the trucks I've seen when there are competitions, you go walk by and everybody has their truck, they're all, it's like a little mini car show. They're all lined up in a row. And some of the the hard bodies, the hood comes up and there's a little molded plastic V8 engine that if you want to go crazy, you can paint it. And
RC 4-wheel drive is very popular for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
they make a lot of scale stuff like that.
They even have licensed Edelbrock valve cover, faux valve covers for them, and it's
they get little engines you can put in them. But yeah, that's it's a whole other thing too because
rabbit hole. Yeah,
you got to decide what you want out of the crawler truck. I'd say start with something like a TRX 4 Sport or an Axial SCX 10-3. Either one of those, and parts will be easy to get and all that fun stuff. But yeah, just I think that's pretty much it about rock crawling. Again, I have a couple videos up on it that we do our Thursday night comps in here. And again, way more fun with a group of friends than just driving around by yourself. Pretty much anything in this hobby is more fun with a group of friends.
Yeah.
Really. I guess that's just life in general.
Yeah, it is. But it's especially true here.
Right. It's really just a great hobby. If you're looking for something, you can tinker on it. And it's really a hobby you can take as far as you want. Not just crawlers, just the whole thing in general.
Yeah, you're not going to run out of stuff to do with this hobby.
Yeah, if you just want to buy a Slash, beat it around the yard a few times a year, perfectly fine. If you want to do it every day of your life and come to a racetrack and spend time with your friends, you can. It's literally become my lifestyle. And I know my buddies, I come down 2-3 times a week, and we race just about everything. One of them sitting here doing a podcast with me.
I mean, and that's, so from being in the hobby for so long, you do go through periods where you kind of you need to take a step back. That's why I take the summers off.
Oh, sure.
And you'll learn, how much is too much. Some people, this is their outlet. This is their fun. They don't do video games. They don't do street bikes, dirt bikes, whatever. So they're here all the time, happy as a clam. But if you get to the point where you burn out, or you know enough to take a break, when you come back, for me, as soon as the air turns and it's fall, I get butterflies in my stomach because I'm like, ooh, it's time to go back racing.
Time to race.
And you don't get to the point where if you have a bad night, you're that guy throwing his controller across the track. Which I will say, none of the oval guys are going to watch this. I'll say it. When I used to run oval, there was way more rage than I have. I've almost never in my 10 years here seen arguments, like you might get a couple guys with in a tiff where it's like, hey, thanks a lot for taking me out. Oh, you should have moved first, whatever. But even people who aren't necessarily chummy here get along. It's a really good environment.
It's a good community to get
There's
into.
not a lot of burnout either. People come and go. Life changes, stuff happens, but it's a good community.
Yeah, and I mean we're just we're speaking for what we do here, but I'm sure across the country there's plenty of clubs and places relatively close to what we do here, and
yeah,
it's good to get something involved in something like that. And whether you're bashing, racing, or rock crawling, and we didn't even touch on boats and airplanes and helicopters and all that fun stuff too.
Yeah, that's out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, which is a whole nother thing too, but not quite as in depth. But find out, go to your hobby shop, find out what they're doing, bashing, racing, crawling, and then find out what brands they carry, and try to make an educated decision on what you should get for your first car.
Yep.
And of course, if you don't have that option, reach out to us. I'll try the best I can to point you in the right direction. But really finding a quality brand and a knowledgeable person or staff of some kind to guide you is just really the way to go.
Yep. And if you can't find that, you got us.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep making YouTube videos. So, but anyway, I think that's a good point to end it off in the first episode of the Tyler's Talking RC, brought to you by RCMadness. But anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and if you're on YouTube, thanks for watching. New episode coming shortly. Category undetermined.
Yeah, so a lot of this is we're kind of just like seat of our pants.
Yeah,
he's coming up with ideas. I'm coming up with knowledge. So if there's stuff that you guys want discussed, throw it in the comments.
Feel free to let us know.
And if we can, we will.
We'll answer, or we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Later.
Bye.